I kind of wish that they would have just killed all of them and we started with a clean slate. Hi guys, welcome to another Nerd Rants video. We're going to be talking about a show that I watched recently, called Emerald City. It's kind of a darker version of Wizard of Oz, I guess. And yeah, it's very interesting. They take the land of Oz and make it very much their own and very unique to what we see in the original. It's very much an intriguing storyline, and just my luck, right as I'm getting into it, around the end of the first season, I'm really starting to get into the story. And have had a good amount of time to get hooked on some of these characters, because it's a short, 10 episode first season. As I get to the end of that and we have this cliffhanger, and I've gotten attached to some of these characters and I've gotten into the story and the world, I find out it got canceled. That's my luck, guys. I don't know. I get into a show, or there's any kind of show that I'm just even remotely interested in, and the chances are pretty good in my case that the show gets canceled, because Teen Titans, Young Justice for a while, Shannara Chronicles, Generator Rex got canceled. There's just a very long list. I can't even think of all of them right now. That's 4 off the top of my head, because they're some of my favorite shows. But there's a decently long list of shows that I have watched, that I've gotten into, and that I've found out was canceled. Gargoyles, that's another one. But just all of these shows that I get into, that I enjoy, and they get canceled. I guess that just goes to show where my opinion of good TV stands compared to the rest of society, because what the heck? Now the show certainly isn't the top, doesn't make the top of my favorite shows list. It's got its flaws, and there are quite a few of them. There were definitely parts of the story where we're doing one character's little subplot story, whatever, and I really didn't care. But for the most part, I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the overarching story. I enjoyed the world that they were building. Because we have the Munchkins, which I can't remember. They pronounce it weird so that it sounds like its own little thing. I don't remember how exactly they pronounce it though, because they only say it once, which is a little sad, because they're some of my favorite characters. But anyway, the Munchkins are basically a Norse tribe living on the outskirts of Oz. They call themselves the Free Tribes of Oz, and they basically are self-sufficient. They are technically within the bounds of Oz and the wizard's domain, but they really just are very independent. And they're really cool. I really like them, even though they don't get a whole lot of screen time. And Ojo's great. He's the only, well, technically not the only named Munchkin that we get. We do get his wife's name, but she's not exactly relevant until the end. But yes, the Munchkins, or whatever they're called in this series, are very cool. The wizard and the witches are all just crap people, and I honestly wanted all of them to die so that we could wipe the slate clean and start over, because I honestly didn't know who was supposed to be the villain and who we were supposed to be rooting for in this story. They were all just crap people. Because the witches, obviously we have the Wicked Witch of the West. So she's just kind of a crappy person, but she was the most tolerable of all of them. Glinda was awful, honestly. Her character, she was written I think, to be an unlikable character. But she's just, ugh. Like, she's an ends justify the means, no matter what kind of person. And her ends are magic needs to be allowed again because the wizard took over and he banned magic. And so those who are known witches or practitioners of magic aren't allowed to use their magic. Some are hunted down if they refuse to follow that law. There's the prison of the abject, which was created by the Witch of the East, which is, they don't fully explain the prison of the abject, and I wish they kind of would have, because it seemed like a very interesting thing, but I didn't understand what was happening. So it was a tree with a skinned man inside of it. Yeah, surrounded by muck, and that's where witches and whatever else that disobeyed his laws were imprisoned. And I didn't fully understand that, like, oh, seems straightforward enough. And then there's a scene right before the Witch of the East dies, where she's interacting with Dorothy and the Scarecrow of this story, who's just a guy with amnesia, which is a cool take on it. Anyway, she's interacting with them and attacking them, and it keeps flashing between them being on the road, on the yellow brick road with her, and also being in the prison of the abject. So I'm not really sure how it works or why or what's happening with that, and they didn't explain it, but yeah. So that was interesting. The Wizard of Oz is just an absolute douchebag, and I don't like him. There was no hope for me liking him. He's a power-hungry douche. He came from our world and was basically invisible on our world, and then so when he got to Oz and was able to bring science or magic, or whatever they called it, the magic of science to the land of Oz, he was very, very much enjoyed that. He literally instigated the accident that brought him and 2 other people to Oz, and the accident got one of the ladies' husbands killed. So just a crappy person in general. It's not just like power corrupting him, it's just straight up, he's awful. And the Witch of the East is really short-lived character. Because she gets run over by a car, but in this, only witches can kill witches. And so she doesn't actually die, she comes back. And then Dorothy is 20 in this, not a child. And she got there in a police car, so she has a gun with her. And she tricks the Witch of the East into just straight up killing herself because she doesn't understand how a gun works. And Dorothy's like, okay, I'll tell you how it works. Point this end at your forehead and then pull the trigger. Dead. So, yeah, that's fun. So everyone's after her because she killed a witch. And also, she tore open the sky, which is, a tornado. That's how she got there. And that, in this world, is the first sign of the Beast Forever's return, which is just this horrible monster that takes different forms each time it comes back and destroys everything and kills millions. And just is awful. And the Wizard of Oz stopped it last time when all these witches couldn't. And he stops with the help of giant stone soldiers called the Immortal Soldiers or something. I don't remember what their technical title is, because again, they don't say the names of it all that much. They just put it out there. Like, I think they only say the actual names of his immortal soldiers like 2 or 3 times. And yeah. Which is not great for someone who wants to understand what things are called and understand the lore and know what's happening, which is how my brain works. I like knowing the names of things and being technically correct with everything that's happening, because my brain likes to retain that information, and when I don't get that information, it's a little frustrating, because then I try to talk about it, but I don't know what the terms to use, and so then it's just aggravating. But it's fine, we work with what we got. It was only 10 episodes. I can't expect them to fit all the lore into 10 episodes. But anyway, Dorothy's obviously trying to get home. Toto in this is the police officer, the car that she came in. That's his German Shepherd. He doesn't play a huge role. He's just kind of there to be a reference to the original. Yeah, the other storyline that we get about episode 2 or 3, I think, is the character Tib. Or Tip. The character Tip, who is a boy that's been trapped by a doctor, I guess, a healer. Call her a healer. Who's a witch who has been going against the laws against magic, and using magic to make a medicine to treat Tip's mysterious disease that she references we don't get an explanation for what it actually is until the end of the episode, after Dorothy and they call him Lucas because he has amnesia and he doesn't know his name. He's a scarecrow. But they go there because he was very, very much injured and then strung up and left to die. And so they have to go to this healer because he's dying still. They find out about Tip and rescue him. And then, with the help of Jack, who's Tip's friend, and eventually becomes the Tin Man, for reasons I'll explain in a minute. But then at the end of the episode, Tip and Jack are camping out in the woods, and we end the episode with Jack waking up. Tip's gone, and he starts chasing this figure through the woods because you're wearing Tip's coat, but you're not Tip. Turns out Tip's actually a girl, and this healer lady has been using magic in the medicine to turn her into a boy. There was a lot of nonsensical ranting that happened after that episode before I went to bed, because what the heck? I had no context for what was happening at the moment that I watched that. All I knew was Tip's a girl now. What? And I kind of figured the magic that the healer was using was what turned her into a guy, and because the medicine wore off, you're a girl now, this is what you were born as, and da 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 da. But that was probably my least favorite part of the entire series, was that whole arc of Tip being like, no, I'm a boy this whole freaking time, which I get. You, as long as you can remember, you've been a boy. I get having a little bit of like, hold on a second, I need to process this. But even after being told you were born as a girl, someone turned you into a boy, she's still on it, and it fades out a little bit as we go and get into some of the later episodes. And then I think it's the last episode. I think it's straight up the last episode. Because Tip is trying to live her own life, figure out who the heck she is. Gets into a situation where both Glinda and the Witch of the West want her, because Glinda takes in orphan girls and apprentices them, essentially. And then the Witch of the West runs a brothel. And so she's looking for girls for a different reason. Anyway, Tip goes with the Witch of the West to gain magic. So, eventually, they find a way to, the West finds a way to give her that. And so she gets magic, and so West is teaching her how to use it. And she uses the magic to turn herself back into a boy. And there's a whole conversation they have in the woods about it, and it sounds a whole lot like they're trying to make a trans character, I guess. I don't actually know what their goal was. I'm assuming it was sort of trans or something. I don't know, but it got borderline to that point with the discussion, and I was just sitting there, no, why? I like Tip as a girl. I like this character that they have built, and the concept of her being this long lost princess of the original of the king and queen before the Wizard of Oz took over, who supported magic and who were good people, and they got killed, but their daughter somehow survived, and she's been in hiding. And I hate that they took her character in that direction and pushed a little bit more towards the almost trans-ish side of it. I don't know. I didn't like it. I liked Ozma, which is her real name. I didn't like Tip. I like to put it that way. Ozma was great, which is who she really is, the girl, the lost princess. I loved Ozma. She was a great character. Tip was unnecessary. Like, they didn't have to turn her into a boy in order to protect her from people seeking to destroy the royal family, because they thought the royal family was already dead. And do you understand how many teenage girls there are in the world that could probably pass for the princess? Just saying. Turning her into a boy was not the only option. You didn't have to do it that way. They chose to do it that way, which means they were trying to do some sort of weird magical trans something. I don't know. It kind of sucked. It was my least favorite part of the entire show. Thankfully, Tip is only around for like 2 episodes, because the first episode where her character is introduced is, I don't even know what to call it, where Ozma's character, Ozma Tip, whatever, is introduced, and then the last episode when Ozma has magic and she turns back into a boy, but then she turns back into a girl because she has to convince all of these allies of the old king that she really is his daughter, and that they should follow her to reclaim the throne of Oz. And after that, we don't see Tip again. And I'm fine with that. I really, really, really don't want Tip around, because Tip is a very boring, unnecessary thing that happened in this series. Rant about that over. Jack becoming the Tin Man was actually very cool. So Ozma, we'll call her Tip because that's how Jack knew her. Tip and Jack get into a fight because Tip's like, no, I don't understand. This isn't who I am. Again, because they made her magically turn into a boy all the time, it was understandable that she had the whole, no, not who I am, what the heck moment. Get into a fight. She goes, no, this isn't me. Shoves him. He falls off a building. She thinks he dies. And so she runs off, going, what the heck, I killed a person. Terrified, shocked, panicked, runs. Completely understandable, honestly. If you think you killed your best friend, she straight up tries to commit suicide, then gets stopped by somebody, and then that's how she gets into a whole mixed up with all the witches and stuff. But he doesn't die. He's found by one of the ladies who came through with the wizard 20 years ago. And so she has an understanding of science and mechanical things. And so she manages to save him by replacing a lot of his body with metal and mechanical parts. And so that's how he becomes the Tin Man. His love story with the Princess of Ev, which is the country, which is basically the sister country of Oz, and that's where he ends up, and that's where the lady who saves him is from. That's where she's at. And so that whole love story is very much meh. It wasn't all that interesting. But the Princess of Ev herself is a very interesting character. And I will say that her whole arc did not go the way I expected it to, because she wears masks all the time. And we had hinted at that she's this scientist's former client. And so I'm thinking something happened with her face, and she wears masks to cover it. But in the end, it was a little disappointing. It turns out that this princess died in the previous attack of the Beast Forever. And the king couldn't handle it because her and the rest of her family, everyone except the king and the royal family, died. And he couldn't handle it, and so he commissions this scientist to save his daughter. And so she essentially uses what's left to rebuild her. And so the Princess of Ev, I cannot remember her name, it's kind of a long, weird one, but she's just straight up an animatronic essentially at this point, and the masks were there to hide the fact that she doesn't age. It was a little bit of a letdown, honestly, that she didn't have something more interesting happening. So yeah, subverted expectations, but not necessarily in the best way, I suppose. And then we have the whole fun concept of Dorothy. Okay, Dorothy and Scarecrow are the main plot. Another twist that I wasn't a huge fan of, the Scarecrow eventually gets his memories back. Turns out he's Glinda's husband. That was not my favorite twist. It was just, I think it was there mostly to add romantic drama, because obviously the Scarecrow and Dorothy are traveling alone. What did you think was going to happen? They're a thing. But I will say, the part I really, really liked, they find a little girl who is a witch, cannot control her powers. They find her, essentially adopt her. So it's them and this girl, who they call Sylvie, traveling. And Sylvie's adorable. And Dorothy interacting with her is adorable. And the way Sylvie clings onto Lucas like he's a lifeline is adorable. Everything about this child is just so cute. She's such a cute character. And then they had to go and turn her against Dorothy because she ends up with Glinda, who is amassing an army of witches, essentially to fight off the wizard. And so she gets turned against Dorothy, which is won really, really easily. But also, it's really sad. Because then she loses everyone in one episode, and she's just like, okay, bye, peace out, I guess I'm on my own. So very sad. But also the concept, us going through this series eventually learning who Dorothy's real parents are, because at the beginning we have Karen, who you assume for this whole thing is her birth mother. She's the other. We have two ladies went to Oz with the wizard. We have the lady who's the scientist in Ev, whose name is Jane, and then we have Karen, who gets sent back to our world with Dorothy, who was born in Oz. And so we start with Karen going up to Auntie M's house and leaving her in a storm and seeking shelter, and eventually she leaves Dorothy there. And so throughout this whole thing, we're assuming that Karen is her birth mother. Come to find out, the guy who died in the accident that brought the wizard and then Wizard Jane and Karen to Oz is her father. And then Karen is not her father. The other lady who went with the wizard, Jane, is. And so she actually gets to meet her mother in the land where she was technically born. And so that's an interesting thing, I guess, facet of the story. And then the way they brought everything together, I guess, it actually worked pretty well because we have the wizard seeking help from the people of Ev to build guns because he thinks guns are powerful enough to kill witches, since he assumes Dorothy is the one that killed the witch of the East with it, when really the witch of the East technically killed herself, and that's why the gun was able to kill her. And so we have a cool scene of them firing guns on all of these witches and hitting them, and Dorothy watching who she thinks Sylvie died because she gets shot like 3 times. And I was like, yeah, we're killing the witches. And then all of the witches start getting back up. And you're like, well, hold on, wait, this is supposed to work. This is supposed to work. And realizing, or at least those of you who know, those of us who know how the Witch of the East technically died, realizing, making that connection of, oh, haha, that it's because she was the one pulling the trigger. So it's a pretty cool, like, it almost didn't feel like a final battle because it was the final battle of this whole storyline of magic versus science, and the wizard does die, thank goodness, and Ozma takes the throne with the Witch of the West at her side. Glinda doesn't die, unfortunately. Like I said at the beginning, I kind of wish that they would have just killed all of them and we started with a clean slate. But anyway, yeah. So that, in a sense, that it is a final battle because that all gets resolved. But at the same time, it also feels like it's not, because it's also just the beginning of the attack of the Beast Forever, who was apparently the skinned dude in the tree in the middle of the prison of Abject. I don't know why, I don't know how, because it got canceled, and we don't get to see how the heck that all plays out, because we end with Lucas coming back, which I guess his real name's technically wrong. But anyway, Lucas comes to Earth to get Dorothy back because her mother, Jane, sent her out of Oz to save her. And then, for circumstances unknown, sends Lucas to Earth to get Dorothy back because she's the only one who can stop the Beast Forever. But we don't get to see any of that because that's season 2. And we don't get a season 2 because the show was canceled. So the part of the story that I really want an explanation for, all these cliffhangers that they left us on, I don't get explanations for that. It's really sad. That's what I get for watching shows that are canceled. But, yeah. Anyway, it was a decent show. It was intriguing, at least. An interesting take on the Wizard of Oz story. There were quite a few hateable characters in this. I really didn't know who we were supposed to be rooting for, except Dorothy, I guess. But of, like, between the witches and the wizard, I have literally no idea who they wanted us to root for, if they wanted to root for either of them. I don't know. Tip was completely unnecessary. Like, why did Tip exist? Except to make that point. Tip was unnecessary. Didn't need to exist. Ozma was great, though. Jack was kind of cool origin for the Tin Man. The concept of the Scarecrow being a guy with amnesia was also a very interesting take on it. I will say I think the Cowardly Lion is supposed to be the wizard's captain who gets cursed by Ozma because she has magic now. She makes his family forget who he is and then curses him to wander the land of Oz as this lion or whatever, which I don't know if it's like actually a lion or if it's just his armor because he has armor that looks like a lion. But he doesn't actually turn into a lion in that episode where she does it. So I don't know if he eventually turns into a lion or if it's just because of his lion armor. I feel like it'd be cooler if it was because if he turned into a lion, but you know, I guess budget. They didn't have a whole lot of magic-y stuff happening. One, because the wizard banned magic, but also, like, I don't know how much of a budget the show had. It probably took a lot of it, CGIing a skinned dude, and the Twister, and taking her up. That's probably where a lot of the VFX budget went. Like, the CGI and stuff wasn't bad when they had to use it. But I think they actively tried to avoid using scenes with it, which isn't, you know, which isn't bad. There's too much CGI in modern movies and shows, I think. But yeah, it would have been cool to see him turn into a lion. Oh well. But yeah, anyway, those are my thoughts on Emerald City. If you watch the show, have some thoughts of your own, feel free to drop those in the comments along with any recommendations that you might have. I post videos every Wednesday and Friday. Wednesday and Saturday. This is the second time I've done that. Wednesday and Saturday. And I'll see you all next time.